The great chamber of the Galactic Council was built to make visitors feel small. Its walls rose high into darkness, covered with the flags of 47 species. Lights floated in the air like tiny stars. The floor was made of crystal that showed the spinning galaxy beneath. Every detail was designed to remind newcomers that they were nothing compared to the ancient powers that ruled the stars. Ambassador June had walked these halls for 15 years. He knew every corner. He knew which delegates would smile at him and which would look away. He knew the taste of rejection, the weight of being ignored, and the quiet pain of watching his people's hopes die in committee votes. Today would be his last day here. He stood at the speaking platform, wearing the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Behind him, a hologram showed the blue and green globe of humanity's homeworld. Around him sat the representatives of species that had traveled the stars for thousands of years before humans had learned to make fire. The Valari delegate, Oris, sat in the front row. His species had evolved on a world of endless storms, and they had developed tall, thin bodies with silver skin that seemed to flow like water. Oris was old, even by Valari standards, and he had spent most of those years making sure humans stayed in their place. Next to him was Boron of the Kreeth. The Kreeth were reptilian beings with 4 arms and scales, the color of dried blood. They were warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds before the Council had forced them to make peace. They respected strength above all else, and they had never seen anything strong about the soft, short-lived humans. June looked at them both. He felt no anger. That surprised him. He had expected to feel rage, or sadness, or at least bitterness. Instead, he felt only a strange calm, like a man who had finally put down a heavy weight he had carried for too long. Representatives of the Galactic Council, June began. His voice was steady. I come before you today not to ask for anything, not to argue, not to plead. Those days are over. A murmur ran through the chamber. This was not how humans usually spoke. They were known for their endless optimism, their constant requests for partnership, their naive belief that things would get better. For 300 years, humanity has been part of this council. We joined with hope in our hearts. We believed that the stars held friendship, knowledge, and shared purpose. We offered everything we had: our science, our medicine, our ideas. We asked for nothing but a fair chance. June paused. The chamber was silent now. We were wrong. Oris shifted in his seat. His silver face showed no expression, but his long fingers tightened on the armrest. Every proposal we made was blocked. Every trade agreement was denied. Our colonies were restricted to the poorest systems, the dead rocks that no other species wanted. Our ships were searched and delayed at every checkpoint. Our people were mocked, dismissed, and treated as children who had wandered into a room full of adults. June's voice did not rise. He was not accusing. He was simply stating facts, the way one might describe the weather. We tried to earn your respect. We thought that if we worked harder, gave more, proved ourselves useful, you would eventually see us as equals. We were patient. We were kind. We believed in the goodness of this council. He shook his head slowly. That patience has ended. June reached into his coat and pulled out a small data chip. He placed it on the speaking platform. This contains the formal withdrawal of the Human Alliance from the Galactic Accord. Effective immediately, all human personnel will leave Council space. All human technology licenses are revoked. All human research partnerships are terminated. All human trade agreements are cancelled. Now the murmurs became shouts. Delegates rose from their seats. Oris was speaking rapidly into his communicator. Boron was laughing. His 4 arms crossed over his broad chest. You cannot simply leave, called out a delegate from the Morath Collective, an insectoid being with compound eyes that glittered in the floating lights. There are procedures, treaties, obligations. We have followed every procedure, June replied calmly. Our legal team has reviewed every treaty. We owe nothing. We have given far more than we ever received. The obligations were always one-sided, and they were always ours. This is madness. Oris finally spoke, his voice carrying the cold authority of centuries. Where will you go? What will you do? You need the council. You need our protection, our markets, our knowledge. June looked at the Valari delegate. For a moment, something like pity crossed his face. No, he said quietly, we don't. Far above the council chamber, in the darkness of space, Admiral Hana stood on the bridge of the carrier, Eternal Dawn. She was a small woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. Around her, dozens of ships held position. Human ships, freighters loaded with equipment, science vessels carrying research data, colony ships filled with families, military escorts with weapons powered down but ready. Ambassador June has delivered the message, her communications officer reported. Hana nodded. She felt the same strange calm that June had described. After decades of fighting for acceptance, of proving themselves again and again, of watching their people treated as lesser beings, they were finally walking away. Signal the fleet, she ordered. Begin the withdrawal. All ships to human space. No stops, no delays, no responses to any hails. Across council space, the great exodus began. Human engineers shut down their workstations on alien worlds and walked to waiting shuttles. Human doctors finished their final patients and packed their bags. Human teachers said goodbye to students who did not understand why they were leaving. They left behind empty offices and quiet laboratories. They left behind machines they had built and systems they had designed. They left behind 3 centuries of trying to belong. The Galactic Council watched them go with amusement and relief. The primitives had finally given up. The children had finally gone home. Now the real species could continue their important work without the constant annoyance of human optimism. Oris returned to his chambers and poured himself a drink. He had won. Humanity was no longer his problem. He did not notice the small warning light blinking on his environmental control panel. He did not know that the system had been designed by human engineers, using principles that only human minds fully understood. He did not realize that the technicians who maintained it had just boarded the last shuttle off his world. The light blinked once, twice, 3 times. Then it went dark, and the Valari delegate smiled and drank his wine, unaware that the first crack had already formed in the foundation of everything he knew. 18 months passed like water flowing through fingers. The galaxy continued to spin. Trade ships moved between stars. Councils met and argued and made decisions that affected billions of lives. Everything seemed normal. But beneath the surface, something was breaking. Oris stood in the central control room of the Valari Atmospheric Processing Network. Red lights flashed everywhere. Alarms screamed from every direction. Technicians ran from station to station with panic in their eyes. Explain this to me, Oris demanded. His silver skin had turned pale gray, a sign of deep stress among his people. How can all 17 primary processors fail at the same time? The chief engineer, a young Valari named Tal, pulled up a holographic display. Lines of code scrolled past, most of them in a language that looked like gibberish. The systems are not broken, Counselor. They are confused. The programming uses logic patterns we cannot follow. The original human designers built redundancies into redundancies, safety checks that verify other safety checks. When one system started to drift out of normal range, it triggered a cascade of corrections that we do not know how to stop. Then find someone who does know, Oris snapped. Tal hesitated. His compound eyes looked away from the counselor. The humans who designed these systems are gone, sir. We have tried to contact human space. They do not respond. Their borders are sealed. No ship that approaches comes back with any answer. Oris felt cold. The Valari homeworld had 17 billion people. All of them breathed air that was cleaned and processed by these machines. Without them, the atmosphere would slowly fill with the toxic gases that their industrial civilization produced. They had perhaps 2 years before the air became unbreathable. Contact the Kreth, the Morath. Someone must understand human technology. But no one did. Not really. Across the galaxy, on the Kreth military world of Draken Prime, Commander Boran faced his own disaster. He sat in a medical facility, watching rows of soldiers die in their beds. Their scales had turned black. Their breathing was shallow and painful. They cried out for help that no one could give. The plague came from the agricultural transport, the chief medical officer reported. She was an old Kreth female, with scars from 100 battles. She had never looked afraid before. She looked afraid now. A fungal infection from one of our farming colonies. It spread through the food supply before we detected it. Then use the synthesizers, Boran growled. Create the medicine. That is what they are for. We cannot, Commander. The synthesizers use human biochemical formulas. The compounds they produce are incomplete. We have the machines. We have the raw materials. But the programming, the actual knowledge of how to create the medicines, that knowledge belonged to the human consultants who worked here. Those machines have operated for 80 years without human help. They operated on autopilot, Commander. Following instructions we never learned to read. Now something new is needed, and we cannot provide it. The humans did not hide anything from us. They offered to teach us many times. We refused. We said we did not need lessons from primitives. Boran slammed his 4 fists against the table. The metal bent under his strength, but strength could not kill a fungus. Strength could not write medical code. Strength could not bring back the knowledge they had thrown away. At the human border, Commander Tay sat in the observation deck of Station 17. Through the transparent walls, he could see the endless darkness of space, broken only by distant stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the invisible line that marked the edge of human territory, dozens of ships waited. They had been arriving for months. Valari science vessels, Kreth military transports, Morath mining ships, Gentari diplomatic cruisers, ships from species Tay had never even heard of, all of them broadcasting the same desperate messages. Please respond. We need assistance. We are willing to negotiate. Name your terms. Tay listened to them all. He recorded every message. He forwarded them to Earth Command, and he sent the same reply to each one. Silence. His second-in-command, a young officer named Sue, stood beside him. She watched the lights of the waiting ships with troubled eyes. Sir, the Morath vessel has been transmitting for 16 hours straight. Their life support is failing. They have children on board. Tay's jaw tightened. He was not a cruel man. He had joined the fleet because he believed in helping people, in exploration, in the dream of a galaxy united in peace. That dream had died in the council chamber 18 months ago. Our orders are clear, Lieutenant. No contact, no assistance, no response. But the children, sir, will be taken care of by their own people. The Morath have other ships. They have allies. They have the great and ancient civilizations of the Galactic Council to help them. He could not keep the bitterness from his voice. We were told many times that they did not need us. Let them prove it. Sue said nothing. She understood. They all understood. Humanity had offered help for 300 years and been rejected. They had shared their knowledge freely and been mocked for it. They had given everything and received nothing but contempt. Now the galaxy was learning what human hands had built, what human minds had designed, what human hearts had offered. The Morath ship eventually turned away. Its engines flickered weakly as it limped back toward Council space. Tay watched it go and felt something twist in his chest. Guilt. Maybe, or just the ghost of the optimism he used to feel. On Earth, in a small apartment in a city that had once sent ambassadors to the stars, a retired diplomat named Mira watched the news reports. Former colonies struggling to maintain power grids, ancient species suddenly facing diseases they could not cure, trade networks collapsing as the ships that connected them stopped running. Her granddaughter, a girl of 8 years named Yuri, sat beside her. Grandmother, why are the aliens having so many problems? Mira thought for a long moment. How could she explain centuries of history to a child? How could she describe the pain of rejection, the long years of trying to belong, the final quiet decision to walk away? Do you remember when you helped your friend build that model spaceship? She finally asked. Yuri nodded. She didn't say thank you. She said I did it wrong. But it flew better than all the other ships. Yes. And what happened when you stopped helping her? The girl's face scrunched up in thought. Her next ship didn't fly at all. She asked me to help again. But I didn't want to. She was mean. Mira smiled sadly. That is what is happening now, little one. We helped them build their ships. We did not do it for thanks. We did it because that is who we are, but they were mean, over and over, for a very long time. So we stopped helping. Will we help them again? The old diplomat looked out the window at the night sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the clouds, beyond the atmosphere, her people were building new futures far from those who had rejected them. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe someday. When they learned to ask nicely, the galaxy had taken humanity for granted. It had assumed that the helpful little species would always be there, always offering, always giving. Now the galaxy was learning a hard truth. Kindness given freely is still kindness. And when it stops, the absence is felt in ways that no one expected. The cracks were spreading, and the worst was yet to come. 3 years after the humans left, the galaxy began to fall apart. The Morath Collective had been one of the proudest civilizations in known space. Their hive cities stretched across 40 worlds. Their mining operations pulled wealth from asteroids that other species could not even reach. Their warriors were feared, and their engineers were respected. Now their homeworld burned. High Queen Vex stood on the balcony of her palace and watched the fires spread through the capital city. Below her, millions of her people fought each other in the streets. The eastern hives blamed the western hives for the resource shortages. The northern clans accused the southern clans of hoarding food. Old hatreds that had been buried for centuries were rising again, fed by hunger and fear. How did it come to this? She whispered to the empty air. Her advisor, an ancient Morath named Keth, stood behind her. His compound eyes had grown cloudy with age, but his mind was still sharp. It came from pride, my queen. Our mining operations used human extraction techniques. When the humans left, we thought we could continue without them. We were wrong. The asteroid refineries required constant adjustment, tiny changes that only human engineers understood. Without those adjustments, the refineries failed. Without the refineries, we had no materials. Without materials, we could not build. Without building, we could not maintain. Without maintenance, everything collapsed. There must be something we can do. We have tried everything, my queen. We sent our best minds to study the human systems. They could not understand them. The humans did not think like us. Their logic was strange, intuitive, based on patterns we could not see. They offered to teach us many times. We laughed at them. We said insects do not learn from mammals. The queen closed her eyes. She remembered those meetings. She had been young then, a minor princess with no real power. She had watched the human delegation present their offer of educational exchange. She had watched her mother, the old queen, reject it with cruel words that made the council laugh. The humans had smiled politely and left. They always smiled. They never fought back. That was why everyone thought they were weak. Now the queen understood. The humans had not been weak. They had simply chosen not to fight. They had offered their hand in friendship, and when that hand was slapped away, they had simply walked away and found better things to do. Far from Morath space, on a quiet moon in human territory, Dr. Yuna worked in her laboratory. She was surrounded by screens showing data from dozens of research projects. Plants that could grow in any soil, water purifiers that needed no power, medical nanobots that could cure diseases that had killed millions. Human science had not stopped when they left the council. It had accelerated. Without the need to share everything they discovered, without the constant rejection and mockery, human researchers had focused on building the future they wanted. Her assistant, a young man named Kiyu, entered with a tablet in his hand. His face was troubled. Doctor, another message from outside the border. The Gentari this time. They're offering full territorial rights to the Nexus cluster in exchange for agricultural support. Yuna did not look up from her work. The Nexus cluster. 12 star systems, rich in rare minerals, perfect location for trade. They denied our colony application for that cluster 6 times. They said we didn't deserve it. Yes, doctor. Now they offer it freely. They are desperate, doctor. The reports say they have lost contact with 8 of their 12 core worlds. Some kind of communication failure. Nobody knows how to fix it. Exit. Yuna finally looked up. Her eyes were tired but calm. The communication network across Council space was designed by Dr. Park 30 years ago. She offered to train Gentari engineers to maintain it. They said they did not need training from a species that had only been in space for 3 centuries. Dr. Park is on Luna now, isn't she? Working on the Deep Space Probe project? Yes, she is very happy. She says it is nice to work with people who appreciate her. Q hesitated. Doctor, don't you feel anything about what is happening out there? Yuna set down her tools and turned to face him fully. She was silent for a long moment. I feel many things, Q. I feel sad for the innocent people who are suffering because of their leaders' arrogance. I feel angry when I remember how we were treated. I feel proud of what we have built since we left, and sometimes, late at night, I feel a small, guilty satisfaction that they finally understand what they lost. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the gray surface of the moon stretched to the horizon. In the distance, she could see the lights of the new colony being built, human children playing in the dome parks, human families starting new lives far from those who had rejected them. But I do not feel any desire to go back, she continued. We gave them everything we had. Our knowledge, our creativity, our friendship. We asked only to be treated as equals. They refused. They called us primitives. They laughed at our short lives, never understanding that our short lives made us treasure every moment, made us work harder, think faster, create more. Some say we should help them anyway, that it is the right thing to do. Perhaps it is. But there is also something right about letting people face the consequences of their choices. We did not destroy them. We did not attack them. We simply stopped giving them things they did not value. On Earth, in the Great Hall of the Human Alliance, leaders gathered to discuss the reports from outside their borders. President Hana, the former admiral who had led the Great Withdrawal, sat at the head of the table. She was older now, her hair completely white, but her eyes were still sharp. The Valari have 3 months of breathable air left, the intelligence chief reported. The Kreth have lost 2 more worlds to plague. The Morath civil war has spread to 20 systems. 14 minor species have collapsed entirely. Their populations are either dead or reduced to primitive conditions. And the Council? Hana asked. The Council still meets, Madam President. But they have lost all real power. Each species is fighting for its own survival now. There is no cooperation, no shared resources, no unified response. A young advisor spoke up. Madam President, some are saying we should offer humanitarian aid. That watching them suffer makes us no better than they were. Hana considered this. She remembered the endless meetings where human proposals were dismissed. She remembered the trade blockades that starved human colonies. She remembered the laughter in the council chamber when Ambassador June made his final speech. We are not watching them suffer, she said finally. We are building our own future. If they wish to join that future, they know where to find us. But we will not beg to help people who spent 3 centuries telling us we were worthless. And if they die, then they die. And perhaps the survivors will learn something. Perhaps they will build something better from the ashes. Or perhaps not. Either way, it is no longer our responsibility. The meeting ended. The leaders returned to their work. And across the sealed border, the galaxy continued to unravel. Thread by thread, system by system, world by world. The humans had not taken revenge. They had not launched a single weapon. They had not destroyed a single city. They had simply walked away. And that, in the end, was worse than any war could have been. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so empty. Once, Representatives from 47 species had filled these seats. Now, barely 20 remained. The great flags that had hung from the walls were torn and dusty. The floating lights flickered and dimmed. The crystal floor had cracked in several places, showing dark emptiness beneath. Counselor Oris walked slowly to his seat. He moved like an old man now, though he was not old by Valari standards. The years of breathing damaged air had aged him beyond his time. His silver skin had turned dull gray. His eyes had lost their shine. Around him sat the survivors. The Kreth delegation was reduced to 3 representatives, their scales marked with the scars of plague and war. The Morath had sent only one, a tired diplomat who spoke for whatever remained of her shattered collective. The Gentari were there, quiet and watchful as always. And in the corner, sitting alone, was a small delegation from the Outer Rim species, civilizations so minor that the old council had barely acknowledged their existence. Now they were some of the healthiest in the galaxy. They had never been important enough to receive human technology. They had continued with their own simple ways. They had survived. The council president, a Valari female named Kor, stood at the central platform. She was young, the daughter of officials who had died when the atmospheric systems failed. She had grown up breathing poison and watching her world slowly die. "We are gathered," she began, her voice hollow, "to discuss the human situation." "What is there to discuss?" Borun of the Kreth growled. He was smaller than he had been, weakened by the diseases that had swept through his people. "We have sent 100 ships to their border. They do not respond. We have offered everything we have. They do not care. Then we must compel them to return." This came from the Morath delegate, a female named Sheth. Her compound eyes were dull with exhaustion. "We have weapons. We have ships. Perhaps not as many as before, but enough to force them to negotiate." Oris laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. "Force them? With what? Half our fleet is dead in space because we cannot maintain the engines. Our weapons factories have been silent for 2 years. And even if we could attack them, what would we achieve? We cannot make them share their knowledge at gunpoint. We cannot force their scientists to solve our problems." "Then what do you suggest?" Sheth demanded. "That we simply accept death?" The chamber fell silent. No one had an answer. Then a new voice spoke. It was soft, calm, and very old. "Perhaps it is time for truth." Everyone turned to look at the Gentari delegation. The speaker was Sol, their eldest representative. He was ancient even by Gentari standards. A species that could live for 1,000 years. He had been present when humans first arrived at the council, 3 centuries ago. He had watched everything that followed. Slowly, with the careful movements of extreme age, Sol rose from his seat and walked to the central platform. Kor stepped aside. Something in his manner demanded respect. "I remember the day the humans came," Sol began. "They arrived in ships that were crude by our standards. Their technology was primitive. Their knowledge was limited. But they came with something we had forgotten we ever had. They came with wonder." He paused, looking around the damaged chamber. They looked at us, at our ancient civilizations, at our great achievements. And they were amazed. They asked questions, endless questions. They wanted to know everything. How did our engines work? How did we build our cities? What was the history of our peoples? They did not ask because they wanted to steal from us. They asked because they were curious, because they found the universe beautiful and wanted to understand it. Borun shifted impatiently. "This is ancient history. What does it matter now?" "It matters because you never understood what you were looking at," Sol replied sharply. "You saw their short lives and called them primitives. You did not see that their short lives made them burn brighter. A Valari might spend a century considering a problem. A human would solve it in a week, because they did not have a century to waste." He turned to face the Kreth delegation directly. "You saw their soft bodies and called them weak. You did not see that their weakness made them clever. They could not win fights with strength. So they built machines. They created tools. They found ways to solve problems that our stronger species had never thought of because we had never needed to. Now he faced the entire chamber. And most of all, you saw their kindness and mistook it for submission. They shared their knowledge freely because that was their nature. They helped without asking for reward because helping made them happy. And you, all of you, took and took and took and gave nothing back but contempt. The silence in the chamber was absolute. I voted in their favor, Saul continued. Every time. For 300 years, I tried to convince this council to treat them fairly. I failed, and now we face the consequences of that failure. Not because the humans chose revenge, not because they attacked us, but because they simply stopped giving us gifts we never deserved. Horus spoke, his voice cracking. What would you have us do? We cannot change the past. No, but you can change the future. You can stop asking how to force the humans to help you. You can start asking what you can offer them. Not resources. Not territory. Not power. Those things mean nothing to a species that has already built everything it needs. Then what do they want? Saul was quiet for a long moment. I think, he said finally, they want to be asked nicely. I think they want to hear the words that no one in this council has ever said to them. I think they want to know that if they choose to help us, they will be treated as equals, as partners, as friends. That is all? Just words? Words are the beginning of everything. Words of cruelty push them away. Perhaps words of respect can bring them back. Or perhaps not. Perhaps we have broken something that cannot be fixed. Perhaps the humans have moved on and no longer care about us at all. He began walking back to his seat, then stopped and turned one last time. But I know this. If there is any chance of survival, any chance at all, it will not come from weapons or threats or force. It will come from something this council has never tried. It will come from humility. From admission of wrong, from genuine apology. He sat down heavily, exhausted by the effort of standing so long. The humans left in quiet. They did not shout. They did not fight. They simply showed us, through their absence, exactly what we had thrown away. Now we must decide whether we are wise enough to learn from that lesson, or whether we will die still believing that we were right to treat them as we did. The chamber remained silent for a long time after Saul finished speaking. Outside, the stars continued to shine. Somewhere beyond the darkness, human ships traveled to new galaxies, carrying with them the future they had chosen to build, alone. And in the broken heart of what had once been the greatest alliance in the cosmos, the survivors of their own arrogance began, for the first time, to truly understand what they had lost. 10 years had passed since humanity walked away from the stars they had tried so hard to join. Captain Sung stood on the observation deck of Border Station 12, the most remote outpost at the edge of human space. Behind him, the warm lights of human territory stretched across 1,000 systems. Before him lay the darkness of what had once been council space. It was not entirely dark anymore. Here and there, tiny points of light flickered in the void. Survivors, rebuilders, species that had learned hard lessons and were slowly, painfully, starting again. Another transmission, Captain. His communications officer, a young woman named Mina, handed him a data pad. From the Reformed Alliance. Sung read the message carefully. The Reformed Alliance was something new. It had risen from the ashes of the old council. Built by the species that had survived the collapse, they had created new rules, new principles, based on cooperation rather than dominance, based on respect rather than hierarchy, based, if reports were true, on the model that humanity had proposed 300 years ago and been rejected for. They are requesting formal contact, Mina said. Not to ask for help, not to demand anything. They want to open diplomatic channels. They want to know if humans would be willing to talk. Just talk? Yes, Captain. The message specifically says they understand if we refuse. They say they have no right to expect anything from us. They say they are asking, not demanding. Seung set down the datapad and looked out at the stars. He thought about his grandmother, who had been a young girl when the withdrawal happened. She had told him stories about the old days, when humans traveled freely through the galaxy, always hoping that the next meeting would be different, always believing that things would get better. She had also told him about the day she watched the last human ships leave Council space. She had cried, she said, not from sadness, but from relief. Finally, her people had stopped crawling and started walking tall. Forward the message to Earth, Seung ordered. Priority channel. Eyes of the Premier. On Earth, the morning sun rose over a city that had changed beyond recognition. Towers of living crystal reached toward the sky. Gardens floated on platforms of anti-gravity technology. Children played in parks where the air was cleaner than it had been in 1,000 years. Premier Nari sat in her office, reading the message from Border Station 12. She was a tall woman with silver hair and calm eyes. She had been born after the withdrawal. She had never known the old days of rejection and contempt. To her, the Council was ancient history, a lesson in textbooks about what happened when kindness was mistaken for weakness. Her advisor, a man named Day, waited patiently for her response. They built something new, Nari said finally. According to our observers, the Reformed Alliance operates on completely different principles than the old Council. Equal representation, shared decision-making, mutual respect. Yes, Premier, they learned from our model. They learned from our absence. Nari set down the datapad. For 10 years they struggled alone. They faced extinction. They watched their great civilizations crumble. And from that suffering, they built something better. Some would say that proves we were right to leave. Some would. Others would say that if we had stayed and fought for change, they might have learned sooner, without so much death. Day considered this. Do you believe that? I believe that we made the only choice we could at the time. We were tired. We were hurt. We had given everything, and received nothing but pain. Walking away saved us. It let us become who we are now. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, a generation of humans lived lives that would have seemed impossible to their ancestors. They had colonies in 3 galaxies. They had technology that the old Council had never dreamed of. They had peace, prosperity, and purpose. But we are not the same people who left, Nari continued. We are stronger now. More confident. We no longer need their approval or their acceptance. Which means, perhaps, we can finally deal with them as equals. You want to respond to the message? I want to do more than that. She turned to face her advisor. Prepare a diplomatic mission. Small. Careful. We will meet with them and listen to what they have to say. If they have truly changed, if they have truly learned, then perhaps there is something worth building together. And if they haven't changed, then we will leave again. Quietly, just as we did before. 3 months later, a single human ship crossed the border for the first time in a decade. Ambassador Jin stood at the front of the vessel, watching the stars flow past. She was the daughter of refugees who had fled Council persecution before the withdrawal. She had grown up hearing stories of alien cruelty. She had every reason to hate the species she was going to meet, but hate was heavy. And her people had learned to put down heavy things. The Reformed Alliance had sent their own ship to meet them. A small vessel carrying delegates from 12 species, including an ancient Gentari named Sol. He was the only one alive who remembered the first human contact, 3 centuries ago. The 2 ships matched speed in empty space. Docking tubes connected them, and for the first time in 10 years, humans and aliens stood face to face. Sol stepped forward first. His movements were slow, his body worn by the weight of 1,000 years. But his eyes were clear. Ambassador, he said, I have waited a very long time to say these words. On behalf of all the species of the Reformed Alliance, I apologize for the cruelty, for the contempt, for the centuries of injustice. We were wrong. We were fools. And we are sorry. Jin was silent for a long moment. She looked at the delegates behind Sol. Valari with gray skin and tired eyes. Kreth with scarred scales. Morath who had survived civil war. all of them watching her with something she had never expected to see from alien faces. Hope. My grandmother used to tell me about the old days, Jin finally said. She said that humans kept hoping things would get better. She said that we believed in the goodness of the galaxy. Even when the galaxy gave us no reason to believe, she stepped forward and extended her hand, that strange human gesture that had confused so many species. I think perhaps that hope was not foolish. I think perhaps it was simply too early. The galaxy was not ready for us then. But maybe now, after all this pain, after all this loss, you finally understand what we were offering. Sol reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak, but his touch was warm. We understand now. We understand that you gave us everything freely, and we threw it away. We understand that you left not from weakness, but from strength. And we understand that your return, if you choose to return, would be a gift we do not deserve. Jin smiled. It was a human expression, one that aliens had learned to read over the centuries. We do not help because people deserve it, she said. We help because that is who we are, because the universe is vast and cold and lonely, and the only warmth comes from the connections we choose to make. She looked back at Saul and the delegates behind him. Let us start again, not as masters and servants, not as superiors and inferiors, but as partners, as equals, as friends. Saul bowed his head. When he raised it again, there were tears in his ancient eyes. Friends, he repeated. Yes, I think we would like that very much. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance. They did not care about the species that lived beneath them. They did not care about treaties or alliances or the rise and fall of civilizations, but somewhere in the darkness between worlds, something new was beginning. Something built from the lessons of failure and the wisdom of suffering, something that might, with time and care and patience, become greater than anything that had come before. The humans had left in quiet. Now they returned, not with anger or demands, but with the same open hands they had always offered. And this time, the galaxy was finally ready to take them.